Alright, hello everybody. My name is Wyatt, and the reason I am making this YouTube video today, although I've never made one before, is because I love college football. College football is very confusing at the moment. So I feel if you are not an avid fan, or maybe you're younger and trying to get into the sport, the rules and the current landscape of how college football is working right now is a lot of confusing. So I was going to try and break it down in a simple way and go over, some of the basics layout of the college football landscape and see if we can understand it a little better together. So to start, this is what you would call the Power Four conferences. Power Four meaning the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12. Basically, all that means is if you do not see your school on this board, they cannot win a national championship. These are the big players in the game. These are the ones that can win a national championship realistically. If you're saying, wait, Wyatt, there's one school up there that's not listed, that school is going to get its own little section in a little bit, and you'll understand why once I start breaking these down. So we're going to start with the SEC. I have the schools listed in alphabetical order, starting Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, LSU, which is Louisiana State, Mississippi State, Missouri, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. If you happen to be older, I myself am 25, but even older than that, and you're like, this doesn't look like the SEC I remember, you would be correct. In 2025, there was major conference realignment. Some of the big additions being Oklahoma and Texas. That's the theme with a lot of these conferences, and it's one of the main reasons I'm making this video is because of all the conference realignment. So the SEC has 9 protected conference games. So what that means is each team plays a 12-game schedule. 9 of those 12 games that each team plays are going to be against each other. So there used to be, it went away, divisions. So there used to be an East and a West. And then if you won the East, you got to play in the conference championship. And if you won the West, you played the winner of the East. That format is now out of the window. It has been replaced by 9 conference games, so 9 out of the 12. And then each team has 3 protected rivalries. I happen to be a Tennessee fan, so one of our protected rivalries is Alabama. Moving on to the Big Ten, you have Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern Ohio State, Oregon State, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, UCLA, USC, Washington, and Wisconsin. I know what you're thinking. That is a lot of schools. Why is it called the Big Ten? That goes back to the whole conference realignment thing again. There used to be, believe it or not, only 10 schools in the Big Ten. But those days are long gone. That would have been like pre 2010 and the BCS era. One of these days, I might make a video breaking down like what the BCS era was. It happened to be my favorite, but I kind of grew up with that. So, it could just be a little bit of nostalgia. But the Big Ten also plays 9 conference games. So what that means is each one of these teams, so we use Illinois, is going to play 9 other Big Ten teams throughout the year. The Big Ten, unlike the SEC, in the SEC, each team had 3 protected rivalries, so 3 games they will play every year. So we use Tennessee, like I said, Tennessee will play Kentucky, Alabama, and Vanderbilt every year. Every year without fail, they would play those 3 schools. The Big Ten does a flex protect. So there's just 12 games total between the conference that will happen every year. Some examples of those would be like Michigan, Ohio State. That's referred to as the game. That's the biggest game in college football. It's week 12 of every year, the last week of the season. Another example would be like Indiana, Purdue is a protected rivalry game in the Big Ten. Michigan, Michigan State would be another big one. But if you look, the Big Ten here has some West Coast schools in it here at the bottom. UCLA, USC, Washington, and then we also have Oregon up there. That goes into the whole conference realignment thing. The Big Ten used to be geographically the Midwest, just like the SEC used to be the Southeastern Conference. The Big Ten used to be predominantly the Midwest. Conference realignment has changed all of that with the current playoff format that we have, which I'm going to get into later in the video. But just know for now, these West Coast teams are playing in the Big Ten, and I'm not too happy about it, but that's the way it is. Moving on to the ACC, that is the Atlantic Coastal Conference. We're going to start with Boston College, California, Clemson, Duke, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, North Carolina State, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, SMU, which is Southern Methodist University, Stanford, Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. I know what you're thinking. If this is the Atlantic Coastal Conference, why in the heck is California, Stanford, and Southern Methodist University, which happens to be in Texas, in the Atlantic Coastal Conference? This whole conference realignment thing that happened a couple years ago, which has kind of led me to making this video, is to blame for that. It makes no sense why California, Stanford, and SMU would be in the Atlantic Coastal Conference, but here we are. Because of all of that, the Atlantic Coastal Conference has an uneven amount of teams. That was 17 teams. So the Big Ten had 18, the SEC had 16. So it's very easy to say, hey, each person plays 9 conference games. The Big Ten, or the ACC, sorry, the ACC, some of the schools play 9 conference games. Some of them play 8 conference games because of the way that the format of the conference is right now. And in all likelihood, within the next year or two, this will probably change again. So, maybe I'll make another video about it, hopefully. But just for now, know that some of these schools play 9 conference games. Some of them play 8 conference games. And the ACC also does a flex protect schedule. So how I was talking about, the Big Ten has 12 games throughout the conference that are protected. The ACC has 16 rivalry games that are protected throughout the conference. The last of the Power 4 conferences, so you hear that term a lot, Power 4. That just means these 4 conferences, basically actual national championship aspirations. The Big 12. Most would say it's the weakest. I would say the ACC is the weakest, but Miami just played in the last national championship, and we can see that they're an ACC member. Clemson, formerly, they had their run with Dabo Swinney. Maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. If you're watching this and you're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Clemson used to be really good. They've kind of fallen off. But into the Big 12. The Big 12, we have Arizona, Arizona State, Baylor, BYU, Cincinnati, Colorado, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, UCF, Utah, and West Virginia. Again, you're probably thinking this spans across the entire country. This doesn't make any sense. How do you have West Virginia and Arizona in the same conference? Money. The conference realignment, I'm sure will change again, but for now, this is what we got. So the Big 12 also plays 9 conference games. So Arizona will play 9 of these schools every year, and they only have 4 protected rivalry games total. 4 games throughout the whole conference. So not each team, just 4 total. The biggest one would probably be Utah and BYU, the Holy War. Arizona State is another one. Kansas State. But the Big 12 is kind of my favorite conference because it's the most competitive, I would say. And when I mean competitive, the top of the Big 12 is normally not as good as the top of the SEC or the Big 10. Although Texas Tech does have something to say about that. Texas Tech has been putting a lot of money into the program. And we're going to talk about NIL and all of that later on in the video. But just know for now, typically, the 10th ranked team in the Big 12. So we'll use Kansas. Kansas probably finished 10th or so in the Big 12. On any given Saturday, Kansas could probably beat Texas Tech. Not to say that they will, not to say that they won't. That's just kind of what the Big 12 is known for. And to me, that makes it very fun because it is extremely competitive and it has some very wild outcomes. All right, I'm back. And now we're going to talk about the group of five. So, Power Four, those are teams that definitely, maybe, potentially, maybe, could win a national championship, realistically. The group of five are all the rest of Division One FBS schools. So that's football bowl subdivision, which bowl games don't really mean anything anymore. That's a discussion for a later time. But Division One FBS is the schools that, if you're watching college football and you're not super into it, are the schools that you've heard of. So the group of five consists of the AAC, which is the American Athletic Conference, CUSA, which is just Conference USA, the MAC, which is borderline America's favorite conference. That's the Mid American Conference. The Mountain West Conference, the Sun Belt, and the Pac 12. And the reason this says kinda is because if you think back to that Power Four little whiteboard I had drawn up earlier, and you saw that Oregon was in the Big Ten and Stanford was in the ACC, and the Big 12 had Arizona and Colorado and Utah. The Pac 12 used to be a power conference. It used to be the Power 5, but now it's the Power 4 because the Pac 12 failed to secure a media rights deal. And in college football, that's a whole other can of worms. But just know that the Pac 12 basically disassembled because of money. So the Pac-12 is kind of a thing. They're trying to like combine the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, and like I said, this conference realignment is still happening right now. But for now, just know that the Pac-12 last year only had two teams. It was Oregon State and Washington State. They're moving towards adding new schools, mostly from the Mountain West, and trying to rebuild the conference. But it's really sad what happened to the Pac-12. Pac-12 after dark used to be. I grew up on the east, at least on the East Coast time zone. I grew up in Indiana. But Pac-12 after dark, that game that would come on at like 10 p.m. East Coast time, used to be so much fun. Now the Big 12 kind of does it if there's a good matchup, but it's just not the same. The Pac-12 after dark used to be really fun, and it's really sad what happened to the Pac-12, honestly. I know what you're thinking. If you are thinking, there's still one school I haven't talked about that's definitely a national championship contender every year, whether you like it or not. I personally hate this school with a capital H. And now we're going to talk about the one school, I guess technically two, but if you can see, it's real small, so they don't really matter. The one school that I absolutely hate and can't stand, and we're going to talk about why I can't stand them. So we just got done talking about all these conferences. So I'll use the SEC because like I said, I'm a Tennessee fan, so I grew up watching a lot of SEC football. They have to play 9 other SEC schools every year because they're in a conference. So Tennessee, for the longest time, had to play Georgia, had to play Alabama, had to play Florida, had to play Oklahoma. Vanderbilt was good this previous year. Kentucky's had some runs. South Carolina, a real powerhouse of schools because they're in a conference. Notre Dame is independent. So what that means is they belong to no conference. Notre Dame gets to choose their own schedule. They used to play good schools. Historically, Notre Dame is a very crucial player in the college football history. They're a very storied program. They've had a lot of success. But in recent years, Notre Dame, especially with the new playoff format, which we'll get into later, and why this is even more annoying now than it has been in the past, Notre Dame gets to pick and choose their own schedule. And you're probably thinking, independent, why is Notre Dame and technically UConn the only independent schools? Notre Dame has their own TV deals, right? Their own media deal with NBC / Peacock, I guess. So Notre Dame doesn't want to play on these other networks. So as far as TV deals go, each conference has their own media rights deal, which is something that may change in the future. I hope it does. If you flip on an NFL Sunday, and this is very confusing to a lot of people, if you flip on an NFL Sunday, you know, you're going to see CBS having most of the time the AFC games, Fox having the NFC games, but any team can play on any network. There's some regional stuff in there, but if it's a national game, any team can play on any network. NBC has the Sunday night game, ESPN has the Monday night game. Doesn't matter what conference, doesn't matter what division. If you're in the NFL, you can play on any of the networks. But Notre Dame plays on NBC. That is what Notre Dame does. That is what their media rights deal is for. So Notre Dame plays on NBC. And because of that, they are an independent. So they get to pick and choose who they play. And if all we care about for the college football playoff is wins and losses, Notre Dame normally schedules a bunch of cupcakes. They played 2 hard games last year, Texas Tech and Miami, and they lost them both. And you can say that I'm biased. You can say, oh, you're just a hater, blah, blah, blah. I grew up in Indiana. I know a lot of Notre Dame fans. I spent a lot of time watching Notre Dame football, and they are a good team. But you know how you prove you're a good team? You play other good teams. I don't want to see Notre Dame beat Navy by 45 points every year. I don't want to see Notre Dame play Toledo, although Toledo did beat Notre Dame a couple years ago. So shout out Notre Dame. I'll talk about UConn a tiny bit. UConn football doesn't matter. UConn is a basketball school. So the reason UConn isn't independent for football is because the Big East does not exist in college football like it does in college basketball. So UConn would actually be losing money if they joined one of these. We'll say they joined the ACC or maybe the American, more likely out of the group of five. They would be losing money because of how much money their basketball program pulls in. So yeah, I'm not really mad at UConn for being independent. Like it makes sense for them. They just don't really care about football that much. Notre Dame, though, has no reason to not be in the conference. The ACC reached out to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame said no, they don't want to be in it. So maybe one day Notre Dame will have to join the conference, but I doubt it because they actually changed some rules in the college football playoff for this year to allow Notre Dame to get in going forward because this previous year Notre Dame missed the college football playoffs despite having like the easiest schedule in the country and only playing 2 ranked teams and losing to both of them. So that is why I hate Notre Dame. And next, we're going to move into conference championships, what they mean, how they work. Will they even be around for another year? I don't know. We're going to talk about the college football playoff setup. And then we'll probably get into a little bit of NIL, but I'll mostly save that for another video. All right. Now that I got this all drawn up, this is another reason why I hate Notre Dame. But we're going to talk about conference championships and the college football playoffs, which is probably the most confusing part about this whole thing. I mentioned the BCS earlier. That used to be the old way of determining a national championship. Then we had the 4-team playoff, which I was still a fan of because on any given year, there's normally not 12 teams that can win it all. I know it might come as a shock, but there's typically only 4 or 5 teams every year with a realistic chance of winning a national championship. Maybe that'll change in the future with NIL and teams are more balanced and this, that, and the other thing. So for now, we're at 12. A lot of conferences, the Big Ten, want to expand to 24. I am totally against that. I hate the idea of it. I think that the best thing about college football is the regular season. And because the regular season is so important, going back to the 4-team playoff, if you lost week 6, let's say Alabama and Georgia were playing week 6, if Alabama lost that game, they knew they might not make the playoff. So each game had extremely high stakes. Right now at 12, we still haven't had a 3-loss team get in, which I don't think they should. If you win the game on your schedule, I don't care how hard your strength of schedule is. If you win the games, you deserve to be in. Notre Dame last year, like I said earlier, lost their 2 hardest games. They do not have a conference championship because they choose to be independent. So Notre Dame got this other little stipulation here that we're going to talk about. But as far as conference championship goes, the top 2 teams from each conference, meaning the Power Four, the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, the top 2 teams by record in those conferences will play a 13th game against each other to decide who gets an automatic bid to the college football playoff. Typically, the automatic bid will be one of the first 4 seeds. Now, it's not saying that the auto bids have to get one of the top seeds, but that's typically how it would go. So you'd have, we'll say, your Big Ten champ, your SEC champ, your ACC champ, and your Big 12 champ. So there's 4 out of your 12 spots auto locked up. Right over here, I have that listed. Then you have the highest ranked G5 team. And I am going to talk a little bit about rankings and polls because that's another thing that makes college football a little bit confusing, especially compared to professional sports. The NBA, the NFL, NHL, MLB, they don't typically rank teams like you just know who the best team is. College football does rank teams, and there's multiple different ranking systems that actually screw this whole thing up even more than I could explain in this video. We'll probably do a whole separate video about why the ranking system is so convoluted and causes more problems than good. But for now, we're just going to talk about the highest ranked G5 team gets in. So last year, because they actually revised these rules, there were 2 G5 teams that got in, and we had to watch James Madison get absolutely demolished by Oregon. They're trying to avoid that now. So let's say your highest G5 team is Boise State from 2024 when they had Ashton Jeanty. Boise State would automatically get in if they're the highest ranked G5 team. So Boise State, Tulane, I'm trying to think of some other, like Navy had a good run, North Texas, those type of teams. They would fall in that category. And then Notre Dame. Notre Dame gets an automatic bid. This is just added this year because last year they missed the playoffs because they lost to Texas A&M and to Miami. If Notre Dame played in the conference, they would have made it, but they didn't. Notre Dame, if they are ranked inside the top 12, gets an automatic bid to the playoffs. And I know what you're thinking. Doesn't that seem unfair, especially because they get to choose who they play and they play a bunch of cupcakes? I would agree with you. I cannot stand Notre Dame. That'll be the last thing I say about that. But I can't stand them. So you can see your 12 plays your 5, your 8 plays your 9, your 6 your 11, your 10 7. The winner of those games will go on to play one of the top 4 seeds. From there on, keep playing it out until you get a national champion. The way it used to work before the 12-team playoffs, and even really before the 4-team playoff, because people started not taking bowl games seriously because it wasn't worth it anymore. In the BCS era, it used to mean a lot more. And that'll be, like I said, it'll probably be another video where I'll break down like the rise and fall of bowl games or something like that. But your historic games, your Rose Bowl, your Fiesta Bowl, your Peach Bowl, that's going to be these games over here. They're still going to have like the media marketing rights and play at those venues for these playoff games, which are really bowl games, but they don't mean the same anymore because they're playoff games. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1. Long story short, that caused all the other bowl games to be mostly insignificant. No one really gives. I don't want to cuss in these videos. No one really cares about the Pinstripe Bowl anymore, or the Holiday Bowl, or the Music City Bowl. Tennessee has terrible luck in that bowl, but no one cares about it anymore. Most of the players sit out. The bowls don't mean anything because schools are mad that they didn't make the playoffs. So if you just keep expanding the playoffs, more schools get in, more money, blah, blah, blah. I hate it. Yeah, I understand this can be a little confusing as to why this is the process. They're still revising it. This came out in 2024, so they've only had 2 full years of this. And it's going to change again. Like I said, they're trying to expand it to 24 already. We had the 4-team playoff for I'd have to check, but I think it was like 10 years. I think it was 2014 to 2024, 10 years. Could be a little off there, but I think it was 2014 to 2024. And before that, it was the BCS era, which was my favorite, like I said, but a whole other game plan. So yeah, this is how the conference championships work and the college football playoffs. And the last thing we're going to talk about is a little bit of rankings and what role rankings play into this whole thing. Like I said, if Notre Dame is ranked in the top 12 or the highest G5 team that's ranked, they automatically get in. So we're going to talk about the rankings a little bit. And then I'll give a quick deal on like NIL, just because NIL doesn't really have that much to do with the scheduling and kind of the general layout of college football, which is kind of what this video is supposed to be. But I would be remiss to not talk about it because NIL has led to a lot of these conferences disbanding and regrouping and forming these super conferences, even though you're on opposite ends of the country. Like I said, there's no reason Stanford should be in the Atlantic Coastal Conference. I'm going to assume all of you know that Stanford is in California, but if you didn't, Stanford is in California, and they're playing in the Atlantic Coastal Conference. So Stanford is flying across the country to play Miami on any given Saturday, which is just ridiculous. College football has always been very geographical. Like the whole point of the conferences was to be in the same region. College football had a very regional feel to it, which made it so special. So I hope that the powers that be can fix this. If they want my ideas, I definitely have some ideas on how you could fix it. But we're going to talk about the rankings in NIL, and then we'll wrap this up. Last but not least, we're going to talk about how these teams are ranked. So I said a lot of the college football playoff is based on rankings. The typical ranking that you will see throughout the season comes from the AP poll, which is where a bunch of sports writers from around the country watch all the games, allegedly. Like I said, this could be its whole other video. It's a whole other can of worms. But allegedly, all of these sports writers from across the country watch all these games and they rank the teams accordingly. So they cast in votes. The AP poll is what is used throughout the season to delineate what team people feel is the number one team or the number two or the number 25. It goes 1 to 25. And then if you're lower than 25, you're considered unranked. There is a little section for like teams that received votes. So those are teams that some sports writers did vote to be in the top 25, but they didn't quite get enough to make it. But the AP poll is sports writers, and it's what is generally used to rank these teams throughout the season. The coaches poll is the same concept, but it's done by the coaches themselves. So, the coaches will vote, hey, I think Georgia deserved number one votes, Texas, Ohio State, Michigan. If your team is ranked higher in the coaches poll than the AP poll, if you, let's say, I'm following Tennessee on like Instagram or whatever, and the Tennessee football team is ranked 18 in the AP poll, but they're ranked like 14 in the coaches poll, your team is probably going to vote or post about the coaches poll ranking. So not super important, but just so you know, like, oh, what is this? Does it mean anything? Not really. The AP poll is what everything is kind of based on. The coaches poll, you'll just kind of see it thrown out there to like brag a little bit. Some people take it more seriously than the AP poll. Like I said, these writers aren't necessarily like watching all the games. They say they do. They say they do. But there's a lot of examples of them not watching all the games. So some people find the coaches poll a little more trustworthy. I can't blame you if you do, but I typically do use like the normal AP poll voting ranking system. College football playoff rankings. So you use the AP poll throughout the whole season to rank these teams, and that doesn't matter. Around, I think it's week 6, the College Football Playoff Committee, which is a group of athletic directors from like a pretty random group of schools throughout the country. So you have like Arkansas's athletic director and maybe Northwestern's athletic director. They're supposed to be from different conferences and be unbiased. And these committee members rotate. Like that'd be a whole other video kind of breaking down like the college football playoff committee, whatever. But they have to select the schools. So we talked about how the top conference champions, the Power 4 conference champions get a bye in the playoff. All right. And then the group of 5 automatically gets a bid. And Notre Dame, if they're in the top 12, automatically gets a bid. That's only 6 out of the 12 teams. So the remaining 6 teams are called at-large bids. So that's, hey, I didn't play, or maybe I played and I didn't win my conference championship game. So last year, Alabama and Georgia played. Georgia won, Alabama lost. Alabama still made the playoffs because they played in their conference championship game, so they got an at-large bid. Oklahoma was another one. Ole Miss was another one. Technically, Ohio State was an at-large bid last year because Indiana beat them in the Big Ten championship. So I'm not an Indiana fan. I am from Indiana, so shout out Indiana, I guess. Good for them. Who would have thunk? But the college football playoff rankings, these committee members gather once a week, and ESPN has kind of made a spectacle of it. They put on like a little TV show. It's like 30 minutes on Tuesday nights, I think. I believe it's Tuesday night. It might be Wednesday night, but I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday. And these athletic director, these playoff committee board members gather around, and they know all the cold hard facts. They look at the analytical data and, watch the games. And they gather around and they're like, the AP poll has Miami at 11, but we have Miami ranked at 15. But then Miami keeps winning, and next thing you know, by the end of the year, week 13, Miami's automatically not automatically, Miami gets a bid into the playoff because they magically jump from 15 up to number 11 somehow. All of this to say, the college football playoff committee, like, guidelines and rules are very, they say they're transparent, but they're very convoluted. They're supposed to look at strength of schedule and head-to-head competition and, you know, things like that. I don't really know what they look at. No one really knows what they look at. But these at-large teams get picked based on the college football playoff rankings. So by the end of the year, the AP poll rankings don't matter for anything except making you feel good. The college football playoff rankings are the ones that matter. The reason this is important is because we already talked about there's 6 teams already locked up if Notre Dame is in the top 12, maybe 5 if they're not. So that leaves 6 or 7 spots open for grabs. But we'll say Tulane is undefeated and Boise State is undefeated. I promise you they are not going to put 2 G5 teams in the playoffs. So they're only going to choose the highest ranked G5 team. So we'll say Boise State is ranked 13th, Tulane is ranked 15th. Sure, whatever. And let's say the ACC champion is ranked 19. Well, the ACC champion is going to get in. And in the final college football playoff rankings, will be ranked 12 instead of 18, just because the ACC gets an auto bid. They don't get an auto bye. They're not going to get one of the top 4 seeds, but they do get an auto bid. So there's a scenario where you would see, a team from outside the top 12, whether that's 16, 17, 18, move into the top 12 in the college football playoff rankings based on the rules of like, hey, this conference gets this, the auto bids, the at-large bids, stuff like that. Name, image, likeness, NIL. Quick plug about it. College football players for the longest time weren't allowed to be paid. Finally, they said, this isn't right. These schools make so much money off of my name. I should be able to get paid. What was thought to be, hey, if I put your face on a billboard or I use you in a video game or, my car dealership runs a commercial and I want the star quarterback of Purdue University in it, you should be able to get paid for that, which is true. I agree. What it turned into and what it currently is now is me, the University of Tennessee, is going to offer, the number 1 quarterback in the nation $4 million to come play quarterback for the University of Tennessee. There's no contracts. There's no guarantees. The player can just leave whenever they want. Nico Iamaleava, I'm looking at you. I will never forgive you. You deserve everything that you get at UCLA. I hope you see this someday. I know you never will, but I'm still salty. Long story short, there's actually a bill that is going through Congress right now. It potentially, hopefully, maybe will get approved by the Senate to like try and regulate this, so you don't just have universities paying millions and millions of dollars to 18-year-olds with no rules, stipulations. It's kind of the Wild West. So we need contracts, which hopefully, that gets sorted out. We need guarantees. We need to limit transfers. That's a whole other thing that goes into this. Is right now players can just transfer whenever they want. If I'm playing at Texas Tech and I don't like my playing time there, I can transfer to West Virginia. And then if I still don't like it at West Virginia, a year later, I can jump down to UNLV, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, so I can get more playing time. And then I play good. And then my fourth year, I can transfer to the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. And then if I have a good time there, I can play a fifth year and transfer to Ohio State and try and win a national championship. That's what's been going on. And so this bill in the Senate is potentially going to add like some guardrails to fix all that. Who knows? I hope that people in charge of college football, can get their head out of their butt and maybe fix some of this, because it is kind of ruining a lot of like the great things that college football has stood for. NIL will be like a whole other separate video, but yeah, that's all. That's all I got for today. Hope it was fun. Like I said, I'm gonna try and make some more videos explaining, how the rankings works, less the college football playoff committee in depth, like what do they look for, the judgment criteria, where the AP poll started, why we still use it. I kind of want to do a breakdown of, like the history of college football, kind of, especially the bowl games and like the BCS era, the 14 playoff, now the 12-team playoff. Um, Kind of hit how the old conferences used to be, because, like I said, these new conferences don't make a lot of sense. So, kind of talk about the good old days, as I would call it, how the old geographical locations used to make sense. Um, and then yeah, go from there. If anyone sees this and you guys have some questions, any ideas you want me to talk about, I am by no means qualified to do it, but I love college football. It is my favorite sport in the whole wide world. I have grown up watching college football, and I'm trying to stay pretty well educated. I try to keep this pretty basic. Like I said, if you're not an avid fan of college football, a lot of times you hear terms about, oh, P4, G5, CFB rankings, the AP poll, and you don't know what that means. And especially, like with the conferences and everything, that's so much different than most professional sports. So if you don't have an understanding of, what the SEC or the Big Ten or the Big 12 is, it can be really hard to follow along with the sport. College football is just so great. The rivalries make it so good. That could be a whole other video, like the best rivalries in college football. But I just wanted to talk about this because, if you're a younger fan, or maybe you're an older fan and you haven't watched college football that consistently and you feel like you blinked and now you don't understand any of it, because a lot of this stuff has happened within the past like 3 years. It's been crazy. It's been the Wild West. So hopefully the people in charge can get that fixed and stop changing things so rapidly. I'm all for, improving the sport, but also not at the cost of the sport. I don't think the NCAA or the Big Ten or the SEC need any more money. I think that the fans deserve the best product, and hopefully we can get there. So I just want to say thank you for watching. This is the first video I've made. Um, I know my production quality probably isn't the highest, but I just felt like it would be nice to get on here and talk about basic rundown of how college football works. Until the next one, thank you.